Good morning. We begin with a disturbing revelation that has sent shockwaves through Kenya's diplomatic and security circles. According to a classified intelligence report submitted to Parliament just this Wednesday, over 1,000 Kenyan citizens have been recruited to fight in the Russia-Ukraine war. The report from Kenya's National Intelligence Service, the NIS, details a sophisticated network of rogue officials allegedly colluding with human trafficking syndicates to funnel young Kenyan men to the front lines. As of February 2026, 89 Kenyans are confirmed to be actively fighting in the conflict zone, with at least one confirmed death and several others reported missing or injured. This is not a story of geopolitical volunteers, but of economic desperation exploited by criminal networks, with the Kenyan state seemingly powerless to stop it. I'm your host, and this is a Kenya News Update Today 12-minute deep dive. Let's first understand the scale. The number 1,000 is staggering. To put that in perspective, that's equivalent to nearly 2 full infantry battalions in the Kenyan army. The NIS report indicates these recruits are being sent to fight specifically for Russia, not Ukraine. They are reportedly being offered contracts with the Russian military, lured by promises of salaries far beyond anything they could earn at home. The recruitment pipeline, according to intelligence, begins right here in Nairobi, Mombasa, and other major urban centers, targeting unemployed youth and former security personnel. The recruits are processed, given basic military training, and then flown out of the country, often using tourist visas to destinations like Istanbul or Dubai, which serve as transit points before their final journey to Russia. The Kenyan government, through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, has stated it is investigating, but families of the recruits say they have received little to no help. Now, let's break down the financial lure, because this is the engine of the entire operation. The promised sums are life-changing for the average Kenyan. Reports and testimonies from families indicate recruits are promised a signing bonus of between $2,400 and $6,200. That's approximately between 300,000 and 900,000 shillings, paid up front. Then, the monthly salary is touted to be between 2,000 and 2,500 British pounds. Converted, that's between 400,000 and 500,000 shillings per month. For context, the average monthly salary for a university graduate in Kenya is around 50,000 shillings. We are talking about 10 times that amount. The promise doesn't stop there. Completing a 6-month contract reportedly comes with a bonus of up to $8,300, about 1.2 million shillings. The total potential earnings for a single 6-month tour can exceed 5 million shillings. In a country with a youth unemployment rate hovering around 35%, this is not just an offer, it's a siren song. But behind these astronomical numbers lies a brutal reality. Clinton Mojsa, a 29-year-old from Kisii County, is the first officially confirmed Kenyan casualty. He died on the front lines in late 2025. His family only learned of his death weeks later through informal channels. Then there is Oscar Mutoka, whose father, 72-year-old Charles Ojiambo Mutoka, holds his portrait in their Nairobi home, pleading for answers. Oscar was killed in August 2025. These are not just statistics, they are sons, brothers, and fathers. The intelligence report suggests the actual number of Kenyan fatalities could be higher, as communication from the war zone is heavily restricted, and the Russian military does not officially acknowledge these foreign fighters in its casualty reports. Families are left in agonizing limbo, receiving no official confirmation, no repatriation of remains, and no death benefits from the entities that recruited their loved ones. So, how does this pipeline actually function? The NIS report points to a collusion between human trafficking syndicates and what it terms rogue officials within Kenya's own bureaucracy. These officials are alleged to facilitate the fast tracking of passports and look the other way during exit checks at airports like Jomo Kenyatta International. The leader of the majority party in the National Assembly, Kimani Ichung'wah, confirmed in Parliament that some recruits have left through Istanbul using tourist visas. The syndicates operate through social media, WhatsApp groups, and discreet meetings in cafes and bars, often in neighborhoods with high unemployment. They target men with prior military or police experience, but also any physically fit individual desperate for work. Once recruited, their passports are taken, and they are moved through a circuit of safe houses before being flown out. The entire operation is cash-based and leaves a minimal digital footprint, making it exceptionally difficult for authorities to track and dismantle. This presents an unprecedented diplomatic and security crisis for the government of President William Ruto. Kenya has maintained a principled neutrality in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, voting for UN resolutions condemning the invasion while calling for dialogue. The presence of hundreds, potentially over 1,000, of its citizens fighting as mercenaries for Russia fundamentally undermines that position. It creates a direct, tangible link between Kenya and the Russian war effort, which could have severe repercussions for Kenya's relations with Western allies, particularly the United States under President Donald Trump. Furthermore, it poses a massive human security challenge. What happens when these battle-hardened, traumatized men eventually return to Kenya? They will have been exposed to extreme violence and radical ideologies, with no state-sponsored reintegration program waiting for them. The potential for these skills and experiences to fuel local criminal enterprises or even political violence is a nightmare scenario for our national security agencies. The government's response so far has been a mixture of alarm and apparent paralysis. The NIS report being tabled in Parliament is a significant first step in acknowledging the problem publicly. The Directorate of Criminal Investigations, the DCI, has announced it has opened investigations into several suspected kingpins of the recruitment rings. However, no high-profile arrests have been made. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs says it is engaging with Russian authorities through diplomatic channels to verify the status of Kenyan nationals and seek their repatriation. But these efforts are hampered by the lack of a formal bilateral agreement on such matters and Russia's own opaque procedures. Critics, including opposition lawmakers, argue the government is moving too slowly. They point out that the recruitment has been ongoing for over a year, and the state's border and immigration controls have been blatantly compromised. There are calls for the immediate suspension and investigation of any immigration, police, or national security officials implicated in the NIS report. Let's examine the legal and ethical quagmire. Under Kenyan law, specifically the Prevention of Organized Crime Act and the Counter-Trafficking in Persons Act, the recruitment of individuals for mercenary activities constitutes human trafficking and is a serious felony. Those found guilty face life imprisonment. However, prosecuting cases that span multiple jurisdictions, with victims and evidence in an active war zone, is immensely challenging. Internationally, the recruits themselves are in a legal gray area. They are not officially soldiers of the Russian Federation, nor are they recognized combatants under international conventions like the Geneva Conventions if they are deemed mercenaries. This leaves them with virtually no legal protections. If captured by Ukrainian forces, they could face prosecution as illegal combatants. Their families have no recourse to the Kenyan government for compensation, as the men voluntarily, albeit under severe economic duress, entered into these illegal contracts. This creates a perfect storm of impunity for the recruiters and utter vulnerability for the recruits and their families. We must also consider the regional implications. If this recruitment model proves successful and profitable in Kenya, it is likely to be replicated in other East African nations facing similar economic pressures, countries like Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda. This could turn the region into a hunting ground for global mercenary recruiters, further destabilizing communities and exporting trauma. It also makes the East African Community, the EAC, and the African Union collectively vulnerable to external political pressure. The potential for these foreign fighters to return and form the core of militant groups, as seen with the aftermath of conflicts in Libya and Syria, is a clear and present danger that regional security bodies like the Eastern Africa Standby Force must now urgently consider in their threat assessments. So, what is the way forward? Experts we've consulted suggest a multi-pronged approach is needed immediately. First, a dedicated inter-agency task force involving the NIS, DCI, Immigration Department, and the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions must be formed with a clear mandate to dismantle the recruitment networks and prosecute kingpins, including any corrupt officials. Second, Kenya must engage in high-level diplomatic talks with both Russia and Ukraine, possibly through neutral intermediaries like the United Nations or the International Committee of the Red Cross, to establish a mechanism for identifying, verifying, and repatriating Kenyan nationals from the conflict zone. Third, and perhaps most critically, the government must address the root cause, the lack of economic opportunity. This means fast-tracking job creation initiatives, expanding vocational training for the youth, and creating viable alternatives to the desperate choice of becoming a mercenary. Public awareness campaigns are also crucial to expose the lies of the recruiters and the grim reality of the war. In conclusion, the story of over 1,000 Kenyans on the Russia-Ukraine front lines is more than a shocking headline. It is a profound failure on multiple fronts: a failure of economic policy, a failure of border security, a failure of diplomatic foresight, and a failure to protect vulnerable citizens from predatory criminal enterprises. It holds up a mirror to our society, reflecting the depths of despair that can drive a young man to trade his life for a promise of 500,000 shillings a month. The response from the state in the coming weeks will be a critical test of its capacity and its commitment to its people. Will it be a robust, transparent, and compassionate response that saves lives and secures borders, or will it be a continuation of the bureaucratic inertia that allowed this crisis to fester? For the families of Clinton Mojsa, Oscar Mutoka, and the hundreds of other young Kenyan men lost in a foreign war, that answer cannot come soon enough. This has been a Kenya News Update Today special report. Subscribe to Kenya News Update Today for more in-depth coverage.